Hey there everybody, how you doing? I am Francis and welcome to another Is It Possible challenge. Now you guys know how I'm a big Knuckles fan, right? Personally, it's a shame that Knuckles' stages are treasure hunting. Wouldn't it be great if Knuckles could do more? Rather, wouldn't it be great if Knuckles was the star of Sonic Adventure DX? Well, today we're going to answer the age-old question, is it possible to be Sonic Adventure DX using only Knuckles the Echidna? Just like with the Amy challenge, if Knuckles does get stuck, I will be switching characters and then get unstuck and then switch back to see what past that section can Knuckles do. Also, I'm doing the adventure field as a character I'm supposed to be playing as, since switching the character only closes off areas and prevents keys from spawning. And as always with these challenges, I will be using infinite lives. Now, if you guys are ready, let's dive into the challenge. So, as always, we start with Sonic's story, which starts with a battle with Chaos Zero, which Knuckles can do no problem. Knuckles can't use homing attacks, but he has the next best thing, gliding. Just glide into Chaos's brain 3 more times and the Water God will be no more. After that, we visit our first action stage, Emerald Beach, which is no problem for Knuckles. Well, mostly no problem. But with Knuckles' gliding ability, you can take shortcuts, and this is a thing for most of Sonic stages. I don't really have much else I can say about this, so we're just going to move on. The battle with the Egg Hornet, which Knuckles can defeat no problem. You jump into him when he slams down. What more can I say? The first section of Windy Valley, there isn't much to report on, so let's fast forward to the tornado section, shall we? Knuckles can clear most of the tornado section on his own. He needs a little help though with the number panels. Only Sonic and Tails can use the number panels. Knuckles has the same problem Amy did. He can jump to one panel, and then he's stuck until you change your character. After that, Knuckles can exit the tornado, and this is where the fun part begins. If you know the stage very well, you can take shortcuts using Knuckles' gliding ability. I don't really know the layout of this stage, so I did it the intended way. Well, for the most part. Either way, besides the number panels, Knuckles can do Windy Valley, no problem. I was hoping with the Great Emerald's power, Knuckles wouldn't have to do Casinopolis the intended way. I was hoping I could just climb the wall, grab the emerald, and be done with it. So I went to the vault, and to my surprise, the vault was already filled up. I think this is because that's how the stage is when you normally play as Knuckles, but since the ring count was still at 0, I was still blocked off from jumping up to where the emerald was, and my plan of climbing the walls was a no-go. So I realized I had to do this the intended way, so I tried to enter the Sonic table, and this happened! Yeah, as you can see, Knuckles ascends, but he never makes it onto the table. He just gets stuck there, and I can't do anything until I switch characters. So I switched to Sonic, got onto the table, and then switched back to Knuckles, and to my surprise, Knuckles wasn't in his ball form, which really surprised me. When I did this as Amy, I realized she wasn't in a ball form because, well, she didn't have a ball form. But Knuckles does have a ball form, so I didn't really understand this, but in the end of the day, I really didn't care. I could just do what I did with Amy and tackle the bumpers to get 500 rings, and then take the walk of shame to lose all of the pinballs and get off the table, deposit the rings, and grab that Chaos Emerald, being done with Casinopolis. Besides needing help getting onto the table, Knuckles could beat Casinopolis on his own. Ice Cap is another prime example of what I was talking about earlier about taking shortcuts. If you climb this wall, you can skip the whole first section of this stage. In the second section of the stage, you can climb to the top, but the way doesn't open until you do the number panels, which we all know Knuckles can't do, so I just did it as Tails to show off that Tails can use number panels as well. Next is the famous snowboarding section, where Knuckles has the exact same problem that Amy did with the camera bouncing all over the place. The camera is stable while airborne, but you can easily fly out of bounds while gliding. Remember that, by the way, because this is going to be important when we see the stage next time. But for now, you can see me gliding and constantly stop the glide to stay in bounds. It takes some time, but we can make it to the emerald, and once again, besides the number panels, Knuckles can do Ice Cap on his own. Up next, Knuckles fights his own worst enemy, himself. And the game crashes after we beat him, so it looks like this is going to be a common occurrence with this game, so I just did it as Sonic. Chaos 4 is next, but we're not really going to talk about this because Knuckles fights this exact same boss in his story. We already know he can beat it, so let's just move on. Just like we discussed in Amy's challenge video, the Tornado, Sonic, and Tails are all one model, so nothing really changes here, so we can skip this. Twinkle Park was a stage that surprised me. So we started off business as normal where we hijack a car for Twinkle's circuit. At the end, we drop onto a roller coaster and nothing happens. I switched to Sonic and I'm not even on the roller coaster. So I jumped out the cliff to my death and respawned on a roller coaster, switched back to Knuckles and enjoyed the ride into Twinkle Park. So first up is the bowling section and something weird happened. Since Knuckles curls into a ball like Sonic, I figured there would be no problem here. But once I pushed A to shoot Knuckles, nothing happened. Knuckles was stuck and the only way I was getting unstuck was to change my character. Once I switched to Sonic, I was launched full speed, hitting that strike. I just find that interesting where Knuckles curls into a ball as intended, but somehow he gets stuck, where Amy doesn't have a ball form, and she had no problem here. Either way, after that is round 2 of bowling. I figured what happened last time was a fluke, so I tried again, and the same thing happened, so gotta switch to Sonic again. That was the only problem that Knuckles had though. The rest of Twinkle Park can be done no problem. Speed Highway is my favorite stage in this game, so it saddens me that I don't really have much to say about this stage. But really, what is there for me to say? Knuckles can beat it no problem. Just do what you would normally do as Sonic. There's really not much else to add on to that. Next up is Red Mountain, where Knuckles had a much easier time here than Amy did. With Knuckles' climbing ability, you can take so many shortcuts since every wall is climbable, which I did here because I was too lazy to go around the corner and hit a switch to use a rocket. There isn't really much else to add on here. It's all business as normal, so let's move on to the next stage. Sky Chase Act 2 is no different from Act 1. The Tornado, Sonic, and Tails are all one model, so we can't switch it, so we can skip this as well. Sky Deck was Knuckles' real challenge in this, well, challenge. So the stage starts with Knuckles and Tails getting launched out of a cannon. Just like Amy, only Sonic and Tails can grab onto the pillar. But just like Amy, Knuckles can stand on the ledges. I just needed a little boost from the glide to make it. So with these pillars, I had trouble standing on the edges, so I decided, why not glide into them and see if they are climbable, and they were. Well, kinda. I can't climb them, but I can attach them, and eventually, I just start spinning. I'm not stuck though. I can jump off anytime I want, but as you can see, I'm still attached to the pillar. After some effort, I can break free and ended up back where I started. So I tried to glide around them, but I grabbed onto one, and when I finally got off, I was beyond saving. So I decided to try the pillars again, and with some careful timing, I made it across. This launch pad launches me onto another pillar, but since Knuckles doesn't grab on like Sonic or Tails, he plummets to his death. Instead, I glided to these pillars and used this rocket and continued on my way. This section with the big cannon, you can take a shortcut by climbing to the top section. From here, we blow up the cannon and move on to the next section, which isn't as brutal as the first section. This first part though wins. Knuckles can't grab onto things like Sonic can, but grabbing onto walls also works. There isn't much else to add on to this, so let's blow up this cannon and move on to the next section. That shot was perfectly timed, by the way. I just wanted to show that off. This brings us to the section of the stage where it tilts, but here's something that I found interesting. The stage tilts for every character at this section, except for Knuckles. I think the reason for this is linked to why the stage auto tilts in Knuckles' Sky Deck for Amy and everybody else who is not Knuckles. Since Knuckles' gimmick for Sky Deck is to control the tilt, I guess the only way that was possible was to prevent it from auto tilting as Knuckles. However, this didn't make the goal easy to reach. There's an invisible wall that prevents us from just gliding to the goal. I know, this looks and sounds impossible, right? But there is a way. If we glide and land on this tunnel, we can reach this part where the button normalizes the tilt. If we can reach there, we can enter the tunnel and complete the stage like we normally would. Walking up this slope was a chore, but we were able to do it and complete Sky Deck as Knuckles without ever changing our characters. God, I hate this goddamn stage! Just like their character battles, Gamma is beatable, but he crashes the game. And we can also skip Chaos 6 because Knuckles normally fights Chaos 6 in his own story, so we already know Knuckles can do this. So there ain't really much to talk about here. This brings us on to Lost World, which there really isn't much to say here. Just play the stage as you would a Sonic. This section here at the end of the mirror section, I had some problems with. Knuckles can't do a light dash, obviously, but he can glide. But what made this hard though was the camera. Luckily, I made it first try, but I was gliding practically blind. There's another section at the end of the stage where you have to do another light speed dash. Knuckles, as we already established earlier, can't do a light speed dash, but this whole room is filled with climbable walls that you can just glide into the tunnel that you need to go to complete Lost World as Knuckles. Final Egg is the final stage of Sonic's story, and this stage is rather easy, all things considered, for Knuckles. Although, to my surprise, Knuckles had the same problem that Amy did with this ramp at the beginning, where he just stops at the top of the ramp and falls back down. So I had to climb it, but interesting, I couldn't pull myself up at the top. And I don't know what is up with this ramp that nobody can do it except for Sonic. But luckily I was able to climb this thin air on the side of the ramp that I used to get to the top of the ramp and continue on my way. The rest of the stage was pretty much business as normal. There isn't too much to report on. Although these robots with the heads that trap you, I don't know if Knuckles is immune to them or not, but I never got caught onto them, but every time I saw them, I was hanging onto a wall, and it looks like hanging onto a wall kind of stopped them from grabbing you. Honestly, there isn't really much else to say about this stage, so let's glide across this gap and finish off Final Egg as Knuckles. The Egg Viper is 100% beatable as Knuckles, and he has an easier time than Amy did. When Eggman rears his ugly head, glide into him. Although sometimes you won't bounce back like I did there, but luckily all of these walls are climbable, so you can save yourself if you either don't bounce back to safety or you miss Eggman while gliding. Here though, I learned something interesting. When Eggman's doing his energy beam, he sets his position to wherever you are. Since I was on a wall at the time trying to save myself, he appeared on that wall. I couldn't reach him out there, and that was the first time I got hit by his energy beam. I was worried that I broke him there, but after he fires the energy beam, he resets his location so he can give you a load of this. Knuckles has the same jumping height as Sonic, so the final few hits when he starts throwing his egg platforms, you just do what you did as Sonic, and with that being said, Sonic's story is now complete. That went a lot faster than it did for Amy, so let's keep going with Tails' story, shall we? Which, as you know, starts off with the Egg Hornet. We just saw Knuckles do this in Sonic's story, so we can skip this. Onward to Windy Valley. Knuckles has about the same speed as Tails, so he can keep up with Sonic with no problems. This section here, I clipped through and fell off the path, but I managed to save myself by gliding. Besides that, there was really no issues here. Knuckles can use the dash rings, no problem. I did once again fall off the path near the end, but I was able to save myself and grab that Chaos Emerald, winning the race. Casinopolis in Tails' story is possible as Knuckles with pretty much no problem. The only problem I had was getting up the slopes at the beginning, but Sonic is surprisingly patient and will wait for you to figure it out. There isn't really much else to say about this, so let's grab that Chaos Emerald and move on to the next one. Dropping into Ice Cap, and you guys know what I said in Sonic's story. I told you how gliding out of balance was going to be important. Well, this is where that comes into play, because just like Amy, Knuckles cannot beat Sonic in a downhill race. Mostly because of the camera. As you remember, I kept entering and canceling gliding, scared to go out of bounds in Sonic's story. So I thought to myself, how about this time I commit to going out of bounds and surprise Sonic by dropping in at the end, and well, this strategy worked. I didn't land at the end, but I landed close enough. As you can see at the bottom, we were cutting it pretty close, but Knuckles did outrun the fastest thing alive and got to chuckle away with the Chaos Emerald. But the chuckling is over as Knuckles decides to fight himself for the Chaos Emerald. Just like in Sonic's story, it crashed after the fight, so I just did it as Tails. Also, as a side note, somebody informed me in the Amy video why it crashed during character battles. Apparently, it has something to do with the character select mod. You see how sometimes you see player 2 and player 4 arrows appearing? Apparently that crashes the character battle, so thank you for letting me know about that. Chaos 4 is literally the same fight in Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles' story. We already know Knuckles can do this, so we can skip this. Sky Chase we can also skip for the same reason we discussed in Sonic's story. Not too much we can say about Sand Hill. It's like Ice Cap, but you're not racing anybody, so you can take it as slow as you want. I prefer to glide through the stage because being airborne is the only time where the camera is steady. I learned during my flight that the ruins that fall have collisions so Knuckles can climb them. Either way, Knuckles can reach Froggy no problem. There's not really too much to write home about, so we can move on. Sky Chase Act 2, once again we can also skip this for reasons that we already discussed. Oh boy, here we go with Sky Deck. Tails' Sky Deck is the first half of Sonic's Sky Deck, which is, as you guys know, the place where Knuckles had the most problems in this stage. So I think you already know how this went. Just like in Sonic's story, it starts with you getting launched out of a cannon, and you gotta walk on a ledge because Knuckles' fists were made for punching, not for grabbing. I remember the trouble I had with these pillars, so I took the green loops, but I had to deal with pillars anyway, so that kinda sucked. I know it's hard to see what's happening here because the camera is impossible. Basically, I got off of the pillar and I landed on this ledge, but I can't move or reattach to the pillar. Jumping is all I can do, and I can't reposition the camera to see what I'm doing. Eventually I got so frustrated that I just restarted the stage. But this time I was smart, and I glided around the pillars, which was a shortcut. This section here, I was creeping through the ground. The first time was a shortcut, the second time would have killed me if I wasn't Knuckles who can glide. So I climbed up to safety and I chuckled as Sonic fell and died, and continued on my way. Honestly, the rest of the stage wasn't too bad. Don't worry about the giant cannon and run to the capsule, winning the race. Just like last time, we can defeat Gamma, but he did crash the game again. There ain't really much else to say that I haven't said before, so we're going to skip over this. That brings us on the Speed Highway, which is the last stage of Tails' story, and Knuckles has an easier time here than Amy did. As we mentioned before, Tails' Speed Highway really caters to Tails' flying ability. Knuckles can't fly, but he can glide, which is the next best thing. You can pretty much take all of Tails' shortcuts by gliding through the green speed loops. Knuckles is about the same speed as Tails, so you don't have to stress out about Eggman getting ahead of you like we had to with Amy. I made it to the end with no problems, but I screwed up the jump here, so I thought to myself, it's no problem, I'll just climb up the building. Well, problemo! Turns out you can't climb up the building. You just go right through the building, and you die. So I tried this part again carefully and quickly. I couldn't exactly take my time since dying, as you guys know, relocates Eggman to the last checkpoint you touched, so there really was no room for error here. This time, I messed up my jump again, but I tried to glide onto this platform and pull myself up, but the platform repels echidnas. So there's really no room for error in this section. If you screw up, you're dead. Apparently you can't save yourself. I tried twice. This attempt, I was about to give up. I already decided going into it that this would be my last attempt. I fell once again, nothing new there, but this time, I could climb up the building. I guess only the top half is coded, where the rest is pretty much a ghost. Anyways, we climbed up the building, and we reached the rocket before Eggman, completing the stage. With Speed Highway completed, we move on to Tails' final boss, the Egg Walker, and yeah, this is possible as Knuckles. You punch or spin into the foot he stomps, and then you jump into his ugly head. There isn't really much else to add on to that, so let's move on to the next story. Which is Knuckles' story, which we can skip since we already know Knuckles can be his own story. So we'll move on to Amy's story. Amy's first stage is Twinkle Park, and Twinkle Park is very easy for Knuckles. Knuckles runs so fast that 0 is a non-factor. In fact, there were moments where I forgot that he was even following me. Either way, you go through the funhouse as you normally would. Here, I was running so fast that the camera made it look like I quit through the wall, but as you can see, I'm okay. This stage is pretty much all business as normal, but as a faster character, so there isn't really much else I can say about this, so we're going to grab that balloon and we're going to move on with the story. Alright, I know I said for these videos I was only going to tackle the action stages, but I wanted to see if Knuckles could do the Whack-A-Hedgehog minigame, and yeah, as you can see, he can do it no problem. His fists are just as effective as Amy's hammer. Unfortunately, Amy's hot shelter is impossible as Knuckles. And that's because of one mechanic in the stage, and that mechanic is this crank. Only Amy can turn the cranks to open the doors, so anytime we see one of these, we're going to have to switch to Amy because only Amy can turn the cranks. Every other character just can't use them at all. Anyways, besides the cranks though, Hot Shelter is possible as Knuckles. You just go through the stage as you normally would as Amy. Knuckles can do the cube puzzle, but the cubes are super finicky, so that was kind of annoying. Anyways, the second round of the cube puzzle, the blue cube appears on its overhead beam. As Amy, this spring launches you straight onto the beam, but as Knuckles, it doesn't. Knuckles, however, can reach it by jumping. He just jumps high enough so you can glide into the overhead beam and climb up it and grab your cube and finish the puzzle. All you gotta do now is go through a few more doors and a balloon awaits you. Thankfully, Final Egg is more possible for Knuckles than Hot Shelter was. Knuckles can complete Amy's Final Egg on his own without ever switching out. It's so nice playing as a fast character, leaving Zero behind in the dust. The only thing that really slowed me down this stage were these lasers, but that was just a me problem for going fast and not really, a Knuckles problem. There isn't really anything else to say about this stage. It's pretty much business as normal, just like, well, basically everything else in Amy's story. So, we're just gonna move on to the final boss of this story. Zero was stupidly easy as Knuckles. Quite arguably, he was the easiest boss to fight as Knuckles. In fact, he was actually powerless against the Chuckling Echidna. So you can push him into the electricity like you did with Amy and then jump into his button. But an easier way to do this is to just punch him. If you punch him, he reacts the same way he does when you push him into electricity and opens up his head, giving you a shot at his button. After 3 hits, the green robot will terrorize us no longer. Not like he was much of a threat anyways. Next up is Big Story, but we're not going to spend much time here. Like we discussed in the Amy challenge, once you switch to somebody who isn't a big dumb purple cat, Froggy is no longer a fish. He gets trapped in a green bubble where you can just grab him completing the stage. The only exceptions are Ice Cap and Chaos 6. You need Big to break the ice in Ice Cap, and only Big can fish out Froggy. Knuckles is powerless against Chaos 6, even though Knuckles has already beat him twice. With Big out of the way, we move on to Gamma's story. As you remember from the Amy video, Final Egg was impossible as Amy. So naturally you would assume that means it's also impossible as Knuckles, right? Well, wrong! Surprisingly, Final Egg is actually possible as Knuckles. So, as we learned in Amy's video, there is an invisible wall that's protecting the Sonic doll, but Knuckles has something that Amy doesn't. He can glide and climb walls. So all you gotta do is climb this wall until the camera freaks out like this. From here, if you glide, you'll glide right past the invisible wall and you'll be on the other side. I was shocked that this worked when I climbed down this wall and realized that I was on the other side. And yes, Knuckles can tear the Sonic doll to shreds, completing Final Egg. Beta is beatable with Knuckles. I don't really have much to say about this. You just punch him or spin into him 3 times and he's no more. Gamma's Emerald Coast is pretty much easy mode of Sonic's Emerald Coast, so it should be no surprise that this is possible as Knuckles with no problems. We see Knuckles beat the shit out of Sonic in his own story, so we already know Knuckles can do this, so we can skip this as well. Our mission to destroy Gamma's brothers begins in Windy Valley, and Windy Valley is no problem for Knuckles. You just run through the stage as you normally would. There are a few dynamite packs, but you can blow them up by either jumping into them or punching them. This is the first action stage where Gamma makes use of his hovering ability. Knuckles can just glide, which is even better than hovering if you ask me. Eventually, you'll run into E103 Delta, which you can take down no problem. He's exactly the same as Beta, so we're not really going to talk about this. And we're going to move on to the next stage, which is Red Mountain, and Knuckles has an easier time in Red Mountain than Amy did. You are greeted with a wall of dynamite packs where you can easily punch your way through them and run through the stage as you normally would. For some reason, there is an invisible wall on this ledge. I'm guessing that's because Gamma isn't meant to go this way. The rocks with dynamite packs are climbable, so if blowing them up is an inconvenience for you or you can't do it, you don't have to worry about it, you can just climb right over them. This one, however, you do have to blow up because you gotta go down the hole. This section you can just glide through, and there you will find Epsilon waiting to be destroyed. Epsilon is really the same strategy as Delta or Beta, so there isn't really much to talk about here. We're going to blow him up, completing Red Mountain as Knuckles. So far, Knuckles has been on a roll. He's been able to do everything in Gamma Story on his own. Can we keep this up? Unfortunately, we can't, because next is Gamma's final stage, Hot Shelter. For the most part, Hot Shelter is possible as Knuckles. I did struggle a little bit with the dynamite packs on this box. Apparently, they are super sensitive and you have to be right up against them to destroy them. But for the most part, this stage is business as normal. These boxes were a bit high up, so breaking them was tricky. What I did to get past this was climb up the wall and glide into the dynamite packs and continue on my way. That brings us to the crane section. Knuckles is faster than Amy, so he can do this no problem. Also, while we're on the subject of the crane section, it has been brought to my attention that this is in fact possible as Amy, so thank you for bringing that to my attention. Anyways, that brings us to the high-speed transit section, and we have the same problem as Amy did. Everything around us is treated as water, so if we fall, we gotta restart. I'm so glad in this game that when you choose to restart, you restart from checkpoints. Why did you change that for Sonic Adventure 2, Sega? Why would you do that? Anyways, back to the challenge. I learned during this section that Knuckles cannot climb the cart, so that was a little disappointing. But clearing this section was a lot easier for Knuckles than it was for Amy. I did fall and had to restart a few times, but nowhere near as many times as Amy did. Anyways, we make it to the front, we hit the button stopping the train, continue going through the stage as you normally would, and then you reach E105 Zeta, and this is when the stage is impossible for Knuckles. Zeta is completely protected by invisible barriers, and these walls around you are not coated walls, so you just phase through them, you try to climb them or glide into them. Zeta can only be destroyed as Gammon, but 4 of the 5 stages being possible as Knuckles still counts as a win to me. Gamma's story ends with the battle with Beta MK2, and yeah, this battle was pretty easy with Knuckles. He'll still shield all frontal attacks, so you gotta let him try to attack first. Knuckles moves a lot faster than Amy did, so you have a bigger window of opportunity to strike Beta. Unfortunately, you can't dodge his missiles. They will home in on you and they will never stop until they get you, so you will have to take a few hits. I did miss a few chances to hit him because he flies out of bounds, but he always flew back into bounds before he attacked again, and you should be able to take him down, no problem as Knuckles. And that, my friends, is where our little challenge comes to an end, because all that is left is the Supersonic story, and as we learned in the Amy challenge, unless you play as Supersonic or Metal Sonic, you just died 2 seconds into the battle with Perfect Chaos, and the game just kept crashing for me when I tried playing as Metal Sonic. So, in conclusion, Knuckles had a much easier time than Amy did, and I'm surprised with both how much Knuckles could do and how much he couldn't do. Either way, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I've been working on this for a long time, and I'm so sorry that it took me so long to put this together. But sometimes, as you guys know, life gets in the way. Either way, I hope this was worth the wait, and I really hope you guys have enjoyed this. Thank you so much for joining me. I am working on another challenge video, somewhat like this one as we speak, so be on the lookout for that, and until next time, thank you for joining me. Have a nice day. Bye, everybody.